everybody, I'm Twanger. Welcome to Twanger's Turntable. Your Friday night video. So I have been away for a little bit, not that long, but I spent about a week where I wasn't feeling so good, so I took some time off. I apologize in advance. My throat is still a little off. May sound a little funny to those who know me. And speaking of which, just want to give a shout out to all my old friends and family back on the island, here locally in Ontario, where I reside now, Ottawa, and also those that are still out in Alberta who have, been missed. Thanks all for supporting. Those of you who have supported me, and thanks. It's awesome. It's just something I'm doing for fun, shits and giggles, but I do appreciate it. If you're new, give a like, thumbs up, subscribe, hit the notifications, and that way you'll know when my next video gets posted. I'm fairly novice at this, so I'm still learning as I go. I'm playing with lighting and stuff like that to see what best works for these little videos. But essentially what I do, at least for this little series of videos I'm doing, it's the debuts in my collection. And if you're just joining, this is episode 5. I've done 4 prior videos, in fact 5 prior videos, but only 4 in regards to the debuts in my collection series. So this is episode 5. And also want to mention, recently we've lost some artists in the music world, namely Bert Shelley from Budgie, who passed away recently, I think January 10th. And then also Meatloaf, of course, just passed away recently, like last week. And although with Meatloaf, I'm very familiar with his music and his contributions to the world of music. His Bad Out of Hell album, which was his debut, I don't have that, so I can't present that in one of my videos. But obviously it was a huge album. Me personally, being born in the 60s, growing up in the 70s and 80s, I knew that album very well. I know that album very well, but I don't have it in my debut collection. So, but I will honor Meatloaf in a roundabout way with one of the other artists that I will present here. But yeah, rest in peace to those two, Bert Shelley and Meatloaf. So yeah, this being episode 5, I'll start off with one from 1971, and it does involve Bert Shelley, and that's Budgie's debut. Great album. This is their album here from 1971, their debut. They followed this up with an album, Squawk, and then Never Turn Your Back on a Friend, with this particular lineup. That would probably be my favorite out of all of them, but every Budgie release, in my opinion, is good. It kicks off with a very, if you're not familiar with Budgie, what I've begun doing in my videos is I also attach a bit of a playlist that represents just the artists and the particular albums I'm covering in this video. So I will have one of those included. But it starts off, it's got that very tuned down, heavy guitar blues sound, similar to Tony Iommi, if you're familiar with Black Sabbath and their early stuff. But it's also been compared to, it's almost like a cross between Sabbath, Zeppelin, maybe mixing a little bit of Rush. In fact, Bert Shelley always reminded me of Rush. And that may be polarizing for some people. I've heard people that don't like Rush specifically because of Geddy Lee's voice and that type of singing. But this is their debut, 1971, and it's a great debut. It kicks off the first side with a song called Gut. And I think most people that are familiar with Budgie, in a roundabout way, maybe not even directly, but because of Metallica, they were often covered, covered several times. Certainly in 1987, late 86, with Metallica's Garage EP there with Crash Course in Brain Surgery. That was originally on the US release of this one, on Budgie's debut. It's not on the one that I have. This is the European release. But you flip it over, and on the B-side, the first tune is Rape of the Locks, which is a great tune. A great tune simply about, him being harassed about getting his hair cut, because Bert Shelley had some pretty long locks. And so, but just a great band, great album. And So underappreciated, I think, in the music world as far as musicians go, in that community. Uh, I think they were a well respected and highly regarded band, but it never seemed to eclipse, get that mainstream success like some of the other bands of their equals during that time, such as the ones I alluded to, right? Because I think they're in that same vein, and certainly, you know, a little tidbit about Budgie. One band that I think most people watching would be familiar with is Judas Priest, and they took Judas Priest out on the road with them in '74, and that's when Priest was discovered and signed by Go Records, and of course that's why you have that Rock and Roll album there. That was their debut, and produced by Roger Bain. Another connection. Roger Bain produced that album. Produced the Sabbath album. Produced the Rock and Roll, for better or for worse. I mean, there's certainly, again, pros and cons, or people who either like or hate the production of Roger Bain, whatever. I don't much care. If I like the sound, I like it, and I don't get into the whole production, and maybe my ears are not cut out to hear all those nuances anyway, but sounds great to me. Anyway, so that's the first debut in this episode. That's Budgie's debut from 1971. Speaking of Meatloaf, there is a roundabout connection with this next one. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. My camera started blinking, and evidently my phone, which I use for the recording here, was low on memory, so just had to pause and delete some files that were taking up too much space, evidently. But anyway, I'm back. So where was I? I was with 1974 and Todd Rundgren's Utopia. So yeah, this is very keyboard-centric, for lack of a better term. In fact, there's 2 keyboard players on here, plus a synth player, so you know what to expect. If you're into keyboards and that type of rock, I guess maybe similarly to early Yes and Genesis, they weren't heavily into keyboards, not Genesis so much, but maybe Robert Fripp and King Crimson, Emerson, Lake and Palmer maybe, but that's a little later. It's around that time, so yeah, I mean, that's what you would expect. But Todd Rundgren was also a engineer and producer. Probably better known for his later stuff in the 80s. I think Bang the Drum All Day, I Don't Wanna Work. That song, that's Todd Rundgren. But where it ties into Meatloaf and Bat Out of Hell specifically was Todd Rundgren's Utopia, was the producer for that album, Bat Out of Hell. And in fact, he featured pretty heavily on that album playing guitar as well, is what I'm trying to say. So not only did he produce it, but on many of the tracks, it's Todd Rundgren on lead guitar. And when not lead, then rhythm. I mean, he featured pretty heavily on that album, Bat Out of Hell. So that's my ode to Meatloaf, because I don't have that album, Bat Out of Hell, in my debut collection. But certainly, you know, good debut if you like that progressive rock, the Todd Rundgren's Utopia. In fact, side B is like one long tune. It's that, you know, it's something you put on and you just kind of get lost in doing other stuff, or you throw on the headphones. It's very headphone friendly if you're into that keyboard synth rock. You know, that's what you would expect with that one anyway. Next up, 1976. I'm gonna fast forward to. And around 76, he had a lot of transition in music. I guess it's that's always happening, right? I mean, that's something that music is always evolving, changing. It's perpetual. It's you know. But one of the newer movements at that time, springing up out of the punk scene and that kind of rock, was new wave. And so one of the bands I always liked out of that era. I had lots of siblings and family and friends that listened to music, and that's probably where I picked this up, this band anyway, my familiarity with them. They were everywhere, often associated with the lead vocalist, who was Debbie Harry, Blondie. Her name is not actually Blondie, that's the name of the band. This is their debut from 76, in fact, right at the tail end of 76, December 76, so more often associated with 77, but the actual debut is 76. Didn't really take off, this debut, and the one that followed it, Plastic Letters, neither one of them did all that great in the US or North American market, but they did well in Europe. Well enough that, they were able to sustain with the record label and go on to make their big one that really took off, Parallel Lines, in '78, that had Heart of Glass and One Way or Another. And then I think people would explore their back catalog after they took off, because that was a huge album for them. But that's a really good debut. Probably best known for Rip Her to Shreds and In the Flesh, Ex Offender. And the drummer on this album, I've often said the drums are what usually speak to me. And Clement Burke, or Clem Burke, is the drummer for Blondie. Great drummer. Just love his tight, in the pocket, always never too complex or just what he needs to be, but complex enough. I mean, when for somebody like me who is always, I love drums. Drums is what speaks to me, and I love to play drums just for fun. But yeah, and in fact, he was a very in-demand session drummer as well. He did a lot of stuff. I'm not, one that comes to mind, I think in '87, he actually played with the Ramones and was credited as Elvis Ramone. But that's Clem Burke, great drummer, great band. So that's their debut, 1976. Lots of great memories with Blondie and stuff. I mean, of course, I was a fairly young kid at that time, and before I got too heavily into the hard rock and metal scene and whatnot, I was like most kids, and it was just stuff I heard on the radio and good tunes. And so yeah, that's a great debut album. And I picked that one up recently as well. I think it was $5. I was looking for something else. It was still in the shrink wrap. It's the reissue, the Back to Black reissue, but still $5. It was sealed. Sounds amazing. At least on my modest system. I don't have an audiophile type hi-fi system, whatever. I've got a good old circa 1982 Pioneer turntable. I'll show that at some point. Direct drive turntable and some old equipment that I paid next to nothing for. This is all stuff I've just pieced together on a pretty modest budget, but for me, sounds great. I'm happy with it. I don't need anything else. I don't need I'm not trying to compete with the digital sound. I love vinyl. That's my preferred format. But I'm not a proponent to argue that it sounds better than digital or whatnot. There is a certain amount to that is true for me, like especially the bottom end. But maybe that's the system too. But when I listen to vinyl, especially the older stuff, and that might be part of it, is the older stuff maybe I prefer on vinyl because that's how I originally heard it. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but I think it does. There's some nostalgia and sentiment there, sentimental stuff. When I hear it on vinyl, it's just the way I typically originally heard it. Some of it's going to be on cassette that I originally heard it, but most of the stuff is old enough that it would have been vinyl or cassette. Very, very little of it is something I heard for the first time on compact disc. Although on some of my other episodes, that would be the case. Anyway, I went off there, but that's fine. Gives me a chance to have a sip. It is Friday night videos. Cheers, everybody. Thanks again for supporting and watching. I do appreciate it. Give a like, a thumbs up, or subscribe, and hit the notification. And yeah, so I'll move on now. Sticking in that same type of music, the movement of the new wave that was springing up in the U.S. and in Europe, kind of spurred on by the punk scene and whatnot, and just a lot of reggae and stuff mixed in there, similar to like the Police, but certainly inspired by the likes of the Stooges and the New York Dolls and stuff like that. 1977, Blondie certainly was inspired by that. There's no question. But so were these guys, Talking Heads, and this is their debut from 1977. Probably best known for Psycho Killer and Uh-Oh, Love Comes to Town. Some great tunes on here. And probably the first band I ever heard that had a a female bass player, just, finishing up on Blondie with, female vocalists. There was lots of female vocalists I'd heard, um, but the bass player being female was unique, at least in my small musical world. I didn't have a lot of exposure to music, and of course it was a different time then. There was no internet, there was no surfing YouTube for new artists or Spotify or all that stuff, right? It wasn't even much music or MTV. It was just all radio or siblings and friends. Peer-to-peer sharing was copying cassettes, right? That's how we did it. But I got off track there, a little rant. But that's essentially, I think I'd read it somewhere that, or saw pictures in one of those music magazines at somebody's house, or whatever. And just a little tidbit. Tina Weymouth, I believe was her name, or Martina Weymouth, was the bass player. I probably liked their stuff that came later better than this, but this is a good solid debut, especially like Speaking in Tongues. I like that album. I like most of the Talking Head stuff. Some people, it's very polarizing, I guess. It's either you like it or you hate it, or maybe there's some in between. I'm kind of in between. There's not all of it that I like, but for the most part, I like it, and I can sit and listen to each album. But yeah, the stuff they did in the 80s with Speaking in Tongues and Burning Down the House and Once in a Lifetime and stuff like that, pardon me, really good stuff. That's their debut from 1977, and they certainly were pioneers in that new wave movement for sure. I think that's hard to argue. And sticking in that new wave kind of movement, 1979, this gentleman actually had appeared on a couple of albums prior to this with the band, which it's still the same people playing on this album, but prior to this, they were known as Tubeway Army. So most of you know who I'm speaking about. Their self-titled debut, and then they followed that up with Replicas, which was re-released again after this, but I'm talking about 79's The Pleasure Principle by Gary Newman. And probably the best known on here would be that huge, massive tune, Cars. And once they, were so successful, they were #1 almost everywhere. That's when they re-released their prior stuff. I say their prior stuff. This is essentially Gary Newman's debut. The band was Tubeway Army. And Replicas, they re-released that following the success of this. And they also re-released their debut called simply Tubeway Army. Huge in that movement, and in fact, the effect of that album was felt. I mean, he still inspires people. Somebody like Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails is often quoted as saying Gary Newman, it was the primary musician who inspired him to start playing keyboards, and love him or hate him. I don't know if you're not a Nine Inch Nails fan or Trent Reznor fan, whatever. But he's credited Gary Newman, specifically that album, The Pleasure Principle, and that song, Cars, as the thing that inspired him to start playing keyboard, right? So, great album. I like the whole thing. More so now than I would have then, although I did even then like it. Like I say, I was pretty young then in 79, so. And I like almost anything Gary Newman did. Prior to that and even after. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. That's 1979, Gary Newman. Next up is one from 1983, and I mentioned before where the albums, the artists I'm presenting here in my debuts in my collection are not necessarily a testament about their place in history, being the best or anything. They're just simply ones that I have in my collection, and I picked them up for whatever reason. Either they were, in a bargain bin, or I really like them. In most cases, I buy them because I like them, but sometimes I buy them because I just want to check it out, because I wouldn't have checked it out before, and it's the right price. I mean, if I see a vinyl for $2, I'll probably grab it, right? But this one falls into that category as probably being one of my favorites for sure. This came out in 1983, Texas Flood by Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble. Gone way too soon. I mean, he passed away in that awful, tragic helicopter crash in August of '90. But this was the debut, Texas Flood. In fact, The album title is taken from the title track, Texas Flood, which was a cover that Larry Davis put out in 1958. But Stevie Ray Vaughan covered it, as he covered everything, just and put his own stamp on it. So unique to Stevie Ray Vaughan. But yeah, such a great album. Thing about Stevie Ray Vaughan is, I mentioned this in one of my prior videos, was that he appeared on David Bowie's 1983 album, Let's Dance. And I like that album. I like most of Bowie stuff as well. But that album he appeared on, he's all over that. And funny enough, only because he was playing at the Montreux Jazz Festival in '82, and Bowie saw him there and gave him a call and said, I want you to appear on my next album. The album he was working on at the time was Let's Dance. And so, yeah, Stevie Ray Vaughan went in and appeared on that, laid down tracks on that album. And the I think the executive for CBS was there at the time and signed him. And hence, this album appeared, Texas Flood, and the start of Stevie Ray Vaughan's, not the start of his career, but certainly who knows what would have happened. I think somebody like Stevie Ray Vaughan, chances are he would have broke that barrier anyway, but who knows? Like I say, it's one of those unknowns, but that's the debut of Stevie Ray Vaughan. And the artwork on there too, I should mention, just because I have an appreciation for that as well. I always love doodling and drawing and doing art myself. The cover art is done by Brad Holland. It's just a portrait of Stevie Ray Vaughan. But great cover. Simple but awesome. It captures that image, Stevie Ray Vaughan, gone too soon. Another one. But that's from 1983 and his debut. Another one of the albums where the drums on that, the drummer on this one, I mean, just phenomenal drummer, Chris Layton, who also appeared with other stuff, but primarily the album he did later on with Archangels. Chris Layton, the drummer from Double Trouble, is on that album. Great album. Last one, I'll wrap it up with my last one from 1984. And this one would fall into that, certainly at the time, heavy metal, hard rock genre. And from here in Canada, out of Regina, Saskatchewan. Do you know who I'm talking about? Regina, Saskatchewan. Come on, who could it be? Vices. Kick-Axe, their debut, Vices, 1984. And I had this on cassette and used to cruise around in all the time with my buddies. I mean, Donnie Bia, he had it on cassette. I had it on cassette. I don't know if he would reluctantly play it or he actually liked it, but on the cassette version, and specifically only in Canada, it had a cover tune they did, originally done by Humble Pie, called 30 Days in a Hole. It doesn't appear on the vinyl, and I guess it only appeared on the Canadian release cassette. But yeah, it's got lots of good tracks on there. Heavy Metal Shuffle, Vices, On the Road to Rock. I mean, yeah, just alive and kicking. The whole thing is good. I mean, it is of that hard rock, heavy metal vein genre in 1984, and they did some stuff after this that I'm not as familiar with. I do remember hearing the one in '86. They did Rock the World in 1986. I didn't care for it too much. I think they did 4 altogether. Yeah, they did another one in '04, simply called Kick-Axe 4. It was all right. I mean, but this, nothing like this. I mean, this was just a good rocking album, and I still like it. I can still put it on, and in fact, not long ago, Jen and I, my wife, we put it on because I picked that up recently. It was still in its original shrink wrap. It's for like $10. And we were listening to it together because she was quite familiar with it. I mean, into that music scene herself at the time. And yeah, we still like it. There's some stuff on there that's cheese or whatever, but no, good rocking album. And the original shrink wrap, it's funny, it still had the sticker on there, $9.79 as I say, or $9.29, right? And of course the promo, the sticker on there, hype sticker. win a Kick Axe 1000 by Harley Davidson. I wonder who won that. It wasn't me. But anyway, pretty cool. That's from 1984. Kick Axe Vices, their debut. And that's going to wrap it up. Like I say, hope you enjoyed that. And if you did, give a thumbs up, subscribe, hit the notification, so when my episode 6 comes up, you'll have notification that it is there. It's been loaded. I don't know when that'll be. I'm going to attempt to do more of these, but I do work a regular 8 to 5 job, so I don't have a lot of free time. Combine that with the time I spend with my grandsons, which I love, Aiden, William, Gabriel. Next time, maybe, boys, you can join me. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thanks for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of your Friday evening, or wherever you see this, on Saturday or Sunday, wherever. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Twanger at Twanger's Turntable. And go spin your turntable. Listen to some tunes. Put some tunes on. See you, everybody. Take care.